They laughed at his wooden staff, until it split the dragon. No blade could break. The cavern's air was thick with the scent of iron and smoke, heavy as if the mountain itself exhaled its ancient anger. Aric's boots scraped against the blackened stone as he stepped forward, the faint echo of his own heartbeat thrumming in his ears. His staff, plain and knotted, was warm beneath his fingers, though he couldn't tell if it was the heat of the forge below or his own fevered pulse that made it so. Before him the dragon waited, scales gleaming like molten sapphire, eyes bright with the cruel intelligence of something that had lived too long and feared too little. The creature's breath rippled the air, making the torches along the walls bend and flicker, casting wild shadows across the cavern's carved pillars. Each step Aric took left a mark of ash. He knew he should be afraid, knew it the way a man knows fire burns, but fear had dulled into something harder, quieter and sharper. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. He had heard them laugh, the knights and the sorcerers, their gleaming blades and jeweled staves catching sunlight as they mocked his simple weapon. "A shepherd's stick," one had called it, slapping his knee. "A child's toy," another had sneered. Even the old mage who'd taught him had sighed, pressing a hand to his shoulder as if to offer pity instead of faith. But they hadn't seen the staff whisper back when the wind passed through its wood. They hadn't felt it tremble at the edge of storms, nor watched it glow faintly in the dark when no fire burned. Aric had felt those things, he had listened, and so when the king called for someone to slay the beast of Haldren's Deep, Aric had come. Not for glory, not for gold, but because he knew something they did not. The staff was older than any sword. The dragon moved, the scrape of its scales against stone sending up a cascade of sparks. "Another one," it hissed, voice like sand grinding through iron. "They send another fool with another stick." Its maw split wide, a grin carved in molten light. Aric didn't answer. Words meant nothing to something that had eaten kings. Instead, he drew in a breath and planted his staff before him. The tip met the stone with a sound that hummed deeper than the air around it, a resonance that rippled through his arms and settled behind his eyes. The dragon's grin faltered. The light at the staff's core flickered once, then steadied, glowing from within the grain. Soft gold edged with a faint, impossible blue. The laughter that once echoed in his memory vanished, replaced by the sound of the staff's slow awakening. When the dragon lunged, the world became motion and light. Fire burst forward, white-hot and screaming, and Aric ducked behind a broken column just as the flames struck. Heat clawed at his cloak, the edges curling, and he thrust the staff into the air. The wood drank the fire, light curling around it like a living thing, then snapped forward in a pulse that shattered the ground. Stone cracked. Smoke turned gold. The dragon recoiled, shaking its head, a sound of disbelief breaking from its throat. Aric stood from behind the rubble, chest heaving, the staff vibrating faintly in his grip. He could feel it, something vast stirring beneath the surface of the world, something that recognized him. The dragon's tail swept across the floor, carving through pillars like clay. Aric jumped aside, rolling against the debris, every muscle screaming. The staff caught the next strike, wood meeting scale with a shock that sent lightning through his bones. Sparks burst where they met, but the wood did not break. The dragon paused, confused, its amber eyes narrowing. "What are you?" it rumbled. Aric didn't know how to answer, not yet. He only knew that every time he held the staff, he felt the world lean slightly toward him, as if waiting to hear what he'd ask of it. He pressed his palm flat against the wood and whispered a name he didn't remember learning. The cavern shuddered. From the cracks beneath their feet, faint lines of light spidered outward, climbing the walls like veins of fire. The dragon snarled, wings spreading wide, each membrane catching the light in hues of blue and silver. "You think to bind me, little man," it spat. "You think wood can chain flame?" Its roar split the air, shaking dust loose from the ceiling, but Aric didn't flinch. The staff was burning in his hands now, the surface too bright to look at directly, yet the fire did not consume him. It felt alive, like holding the pulse of the mountain, like gripping the spine of the world itself. He swung, a single desperate arc that met the dragon's oncoming claw. The impact tore sound apart, the claw cracked. Shards of scale flew like shattered glass, embedding into the walls with the force of arrows. For a heartbeat, even the dragon seemed stunned. Aric stumbled backward, his breath ragged, his arm numb. The staff's light dimmed slightly, a soft whimper in the silence that followed. The dragon drew back its hand and looked at the broken claw, a slow realization creeping across its monstrous face. "Impossible," it growled. Aric said nothing. His fingers tightened around the staff's shaft, splinters biting into his skin. Blood ran down the grooves and was swallowed by the light, leaving no stain behind. He thought of the others who had laughed, of the polished steel that had failed before this same creature, of the songs written for dead heroes whose swords lay in its belly. He would not join them. Not with this. The dragon lunged again, and Aric met it head-on. The staff cut through air, trailing arcs of light like comet tails, and struck the beast square in the chest. The sound was not of wood striking flesh, but of truth meeting resistance. A flare of blue-white energy burst outward, carving a circle of flame that etched itself into the stone. The dragon reeled, stumbling backward, wings crashing against pillars that shattered under their weight. Aric dropped to one knee, coughing, smoke filling his lungs. The light in the staff pulsed faster, almost frantic now, and he could feel it urging him forward. He understood then it wasn't just a weapon. It was a memory. He rose unsteady but determined and stepped through the haze. The dragon was breathing hard, its chest heaving, each breath rattling like wind through a dying forge. "You carry the old fire," it hissed. "The fire that men forgot." Aric met its gaze, and for a fleeting instant he saw not a monster but an echo, something ancient and weary, bound by time and pride. "Then remember it," he said softly. He lifted the staff again, its light steady and calm now, like dawn breaking over ash. The dragon hesitated, then charged, a mountain of muscle and fury. Aric moved to meet it, his step sure, his heart clear. The staff connected once more, and this time the world seemed to stop. Light filled the cavern, brighter than the sun, blinding and pure. The roar that followed wasn't the dragon's. It was the sound of stone cracking open to reveal something vast beneath. The staff's glow exploded outward, swallowing shadow and flame alike. When the light finally faded, the dragon was on its knees, its breath shallow, a long scar of molten gold running down its chest where the staff had struck. Aric stood before it, his cloak in tatters, his hair singed but his eyes steady. He could still hear the laughter of those who'd mocked him, faint echoes now, swallowed by the silence that followed victory. The dragon's voice was quieter now, almost reverent. "You wield what should not exist." Aric lowered the staff. Its light dimmed to a gentle ember, flickering with the rhythm of his heartbeat. "Then maybe it exists for a reason," he said. The dragon tilted its head, one eye gleaming faintly. What reason could justify this power? Aric didn't know. He looked at the staff, the way it hummed softly like a lullaby meant for the earth itself, and felt a pang of something that wasn't triumph. "To remind us," he whispered, "that strength isn't forged. It's found." The dragon's gaze lingered a moment longer before it closed its eyes, the faintest tremor of peace crossing its features. Aric turned away, the glow from his staff lighting the path back into the world above. As he walked, the cavern behind him shifted. The dragon's breath slowed, the air cooling, the flames along the walls dimming until only the faintest glow remained. The mountains seemed to exhale, tension bleeding away into the dark. Aric paused once, glancing over his shoulder. The dragon's massive form was still now, but he thought he saw its chest rise once more. Slow, steady, alive. He felt no hatred toward it, only understanding. In the silence that followed, the staff's hum softened to a heartbeat, matching his own. The laughter of the world above would sound different now. He smiled faintly and stepped into the fading light of dawn. Outside the cavern, the dawn was muted, pale light seeping through a sky still bruised with the remnants of night. Aric stumbled into the chill air and let himself fall to one knee on the frost-coated stones. Steam rose from his cloak as it met the cold, his every breath a rasp against the silence. The mountain loomed behind him, its peak smoking faintly, like a living creature nursing a wound. He glanced down at the staff in his hands. Its glow had dimmed to a soft pulse, faint but alive, as though it too was catching its breath. He wanted to speak to it, to thank it, but the words caught in his throat. It wasn't that he feared being foolish. It was that he sensed the staff already understood. It had seen what he had seen, felt what he had felt, and it waited, patient as old wood always was. The valley below was empty. The encampment of soldiers that had once surrounded the path to Haldron's Deep had been abandoned. their fires long extinguished. He could still see the imprints of their boots in the snow, a reminder that courage often fled before dawn. Only the banners remained, stiff in the cold wind, bearing the king's sigil, a lion devouring a serpent. Aric let out a slow breath. He had slain the dragon, or so the world would think. Yet as he turned back toward the cavern, he could still feel its heartbeat in the stone. He doubted it would die. Something that old didn't end. It changed. Perhaps that was enough. He rose and began the long descent down the mountain, the staff's faint light guiding him where sunlight dared not reach. Hours passed before he reached the lower passes, where frost gave way to wet earth and scattered moss. His legs trembled with each step, exhaustion gnawing at his resolve. Yet beneath it another feeling stirred, an unease that had nothing to do with fatigue. The air was too still, too watchful. He paused near a stream and knelt to drink, but the water shimmered oddly, as though light moved beneath its surface. He frowned, touching the stream's edge with the staff. Ripples spread outward, and for an instant the reflection staring back wasn't his own. A woman's face flickered in the current, sharp eyes, hair like woven night. "You shouldn't have woken it," her voice whispered through the water, soft and distant. Aric jerked back, but the reflection was gone. Only the mountain's shadow remained. He sat back on his heels, his pulse thundering in his ears. The staff was warm again, faintly vibrating as though remembering a name he had yet to learn. By the time he reached the forest edge, dusk had returned. The trees here were older than memory, their roots twisting through the soil like the veins of the world. Aric found a hollow between two great oaks and made a small fire. The warmth licked his hands, the smoke rising straight up into the calm night. He rested the staff across his knees, staring into the flames until they blurred. "You're not done, are you?" he murmured. The staff didn't answer, but he could feel it hum faintly, an unspoken agreement. He looked toward the horizon, where faint orange lights marked the distant village of Terrafall. That was where the king's messengers would be waiting. That was where they would ask for proof. And that was where the laughter would stop, if he let it. Yet something in him hesitated. If he brought back the dragon's death, the kingdom would cheer. But what if the mountain's silence was only the pause before another roar? Sleep came slowly. When it did, it was filled with the scent of smoke and the whisper of scales brushing stone. He dreamt of the dragon not as an enemy, but as a guardian, bound, chained, pleading not to be killed but remembered. In the dream the staff glowed brighter than the sun, and voices spoke through it in languages that bent the air. When he woke, the fire was ash and the world was grey with fog. The staff still pulsed faintly in his hand, like a heartbeat waiting for an answer. Aric rose and began the walk toward Terrafall, every step carrying the weight of choices not yet made. The village appeared through the mist, like a half-forgotten painting. Stone cottages, thatched roofs, smoke curling from chimneys. Children ran between stalls, their laughter bright and unburdened. Aric stopped at the edge, uncertain. The last time he had been here, he had been a student at the outer tower, mocked for the same staff he now carried. He remembered the faces, the sneers, the smirks. But now, as he walked through the market square, the crowd parted before him. His cloak was torn, his boots coated in ash, his eyes shadowed, and the staff in his hand glowed faintly even in daylight. Whispers followed him. He came back. He did it. The dragon killer. He wanted to correct them, to tell them the dragon still breathed, but the words stayed behind his teeth. Instead, he nodded once and kept walking toward the tower. At the gate, the guards straightened. One of them, a young man with freckles and a nervous expression, raised his hand. "Sir Aric?" he asked. Aric hesitated. No one had ever called him Sir. He nodded slowly. The guard's eyes widened, and he stepped aside, bowing clumsily. "The king's envoy waits inside," they said. "They said to bring you the moment you arrived." Aric entered, the wooden gates closing behind him with a hollow thud. The courtyard smelled of steel and oil. Soldiers trained with blunted swords, their movements mechanical, lifeless. None of them looked up. He climbed the stone steps to the upper hall, the sound of his boots echoing against marble too clean for a world that bled. The envoy sat near the hearth, his robes the color of dust, a signet ring gleaming on his finger. He looked up as Aric entered, a practiced smile on his thin lips. "So it's true," he said. "The dragon is dead." Aric didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward, placing the staff upright beside him. "It's done," he said quietly. The envoy's eyes flicked to the staff. "That's the weapon?" he asked, amusement curling at the edge of his tone. "A stick?" Aric said nothing. The envoy chuckled. "The king will want to see it, of course. A relic now a symbol for the people. You'll be rewarded, of course. Lands, title, whatever you wish." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "But the staff, it will go to the court mages for study. Naturally." Aric's hand tightened around the wood. The hum in its core grew louder, almost warningly. "It's not for them," Aric said. "It's not for anyone." The envoy's smile faltered. "Careful, hero," he murmured. "Defiance can spoil even a legend." That night, Aric didn't sleep in the guest chamber they offered. He stood at the window, looking out at the sleeping village, the staff resting against the wall beside him. The moonlight traced faint patterns across its surface, runes perhaps, or something older. He reached out, running his fingers along the markings. They pulsed faintly, responding to his touch. Images flared behind his eyes. The dragon's gaze, the mountain's heart, the woman's reflection in the stream. He saw flashes of a time before men built kingdoms, when dragons and humans spoke the same tongue and shared the same fire. The staff wasn't a weapon, it was a bridge. And now men wanted to tear it down again. A knock came at the door. Aric turned, his hand still on the staff. The door creaked open, and the young guard from earlier slipped inside, eyes wide. "Sir, they mean to take it," he whispered. "The envoy summoned mages from the citadel. They're saying it's dangerous." Aric's jaw tightened. "It is dangerous," he said softly. "To those who don't understand it." The guard hesitated. "Then what will you do?" Aric looked back at the window, at the mountain's faint outline against the horizon. "What I must." He grabbed his cloak, slung the staff across his back, and moved for the door. The guard stepped aside, fear and awe warring in his expression. "Will you come back?" he asked. Aric paused. "If the world remembers why we burned," he said, and slipped into the night. The road back to Haldron's Deep was darker than before. Clouds swallowed the moon, and the air hung heavy with the promise of rain. Behind him, torches flared to life, riders. He didn't look back. The staff's light grew brighter with each step, cutting a narrow path through the black. When the first arrow hissed past his ear, he turned, planting the staff into the ground. The air rippled outward, a shockwave of shimmering gold that sent the horses rearing. The riders fell, shouting, but Aric didn't strike again. He only watched as the wind itself rose, circling him like a living wall. The staff hummed louder, responding not to anger but to will. "We're not enemies," he said softly, though none could hear him over the storm. He reached the mountain at dawn. The cavern mouth yawned wide, dark and waiting. The staff pulsed warmly, as if greeting something familiar. Aric stepped inside, his breath clouding the air. The light followed him deeper, until the great hall opened once more. The dragon was still there, its massive form curled among the rubble, eyes closed, smoke curling faintly from its nostrils. It opened one eye as he approached, a dim amber glow that flickered like dying fire. "You returned," it said. Its voice was weaker, yet still carried weight. Aric nodded. "They would take it," he said. "Twist it, use it." The dragon's gaze lingered on the staff. "They always do." A pause followed, heavy and ancient. "You know what it is now, don't you?" Aric hesitated, then nodded slowly. "A seed," he said. "Not of destruction, but memory." The dragon's breath shuddered. "Then plant it," it whispered. Aric looked down at the stone floor. He knelt, pressing the staff into a crack that glowed faintly beneath the surface. The ground trembled, light spilling upward like sap from a wounded tree. The cavern walls shimmered with veins of gold and blue, the air thick with warmth. The dragon closed its eyes, a low hum resonating from its chest. "So the fire passes again," it murmured. Aric watched as the light spread, filling every corner of the cavern. Reaching up through the cracks to the mountain above. Snow melted, rivers glowed, and the forest at the mountain's base seemed to awaken. The staff's light pulsed one final time, then dimmed completely. When Aric tried to lift it, it would not move. It had become part of the stone. He stood slowly, staring at it. The dragon's eyes met his once more. "Will they understand?" it asked. Aric looked toward the cave's mouth, where sunlight now streamed like molten gold. "Someday," he said. The dragon nodded, a sound like thunder rolling through its chest. Then let them laugh, it whispered, for laughter dies quicker than flame. Aric smiled faintly, turning toward the light. As he stepped from the cavern, he felt the mountain shift behind him, not in anger but in renewal. The air smelled of rain, and far below he could already hear the first birds singing. He did not look back. The rains came the next morning, soft and persistent, turning the mountain's base into a veil of mist. Aric walked until the world blurred, each step sinking into the damp earth, his cloak heavy with water. The forest had changed. Where once trees stood grey and lifeless, green buds now sprouted from their bark. The streams ran brighter, clearer, as if washed clean by something deeper than rain. Birds that had not sung for decades filled the air with cautious music. He should have felt peace, but unease gnawed at the edge of every breath. Change always drew notice, and already he could feel eyes on him, unseen but near, like the quiet before a storm finds its voice. By the second night, he had reached the valley of Fenmir, a wide plain that stretched toward the silver city of Arinth. He stopped at a small tavern near the crossroads, its sign hanging crookedly in the rain. Inside, warmth greeted him, firelight, laughter, and the smell of stew thick with root vegetables. Yet when he entered, the laughter dimmed. Every head turned. They saw the cloak, the scars, the faint glow still clinging to the staff he carried despite the mud caked on it. He nodded once, found an empty table near the hearth, and sat. A serving girl approached cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're the dragon slayer," she said softly. It wasn't a question. Aric sighed. "They keep saying that." She looked at him a moment longer, her brow furrowed. "You don't look happy about it." He met her gaze, his eyes tired. "That's because it isn't true." Whispers began again, spreading through the room like wildfire. He could hear fragments. "He denies it. Madman, pretender." He ignored them, staring into the flames. The staff leaned against the wall beside him, humming faintly. The sound lost beneath the rain beating on the roof. The door opened suddenly, wind and cold sweeping in with a man cloaked in black. His armor bore the king's crest, tarnished but unmistakable. He scanned the room until his eyes fell on Aric. "There you are," he said. His voice carried authority wrapped in contempt. Aric didn't move. "You've made yourself hard to find." "That was the point," Aric replied. The man stepped closer, boots clicking against the floor. "You stole royal property. You've defied a direct command. You think slaying a beast makes you untouchable?" Aric lifted his gaze slowly. "I didn't slay it." The man's lips curled. "Then you failed." He drew his sword, the metal singing in the firelight. "And failure has a price." The tavern fell silent. Aric rose, his hand brushing the staff. The hum grew louder, resonating with something ancient. "You don't want to do this," Aric said quietly. The man sneered. "I want justice." He lunged. The blade never reached its mark. The staff's light flared, golden arcs exploding outward, knocking the soldier backward into a table. Wood splintered, mugs shattered, and gasps filled the room. Aric stood still, the glow fading, his voice calm. "Tell your king the fire he fears cannot be caged." The man groaned, clutching his arm, eyes wide with disbelief. What are you?" Aric met his gaze. "Human," he said. "That's what terrifies you." He turned toward the door, the tavern parting around him as he left. Outside, the rain washed the glow from his cloak, leaving only the faint trace of gold in his wake. By the time dawn broke again, news had already spread ahead of him. Messengers rode hard for Arinth. The king's court would not tolerate defiance, not from a peasant-turned-legend. Aric walked the northern road, the mountains behind him fading into cloud. The staff felt heavier now, not from weight but from purpose. Each time he touched it, memories pressed against his mind. The dragon's dying breath, the hum of power beneath stone, the woman's reflection in the stream. Threads of a story older than kingdoms wove themselves around him, pulling him towards something inevitable. The fire wasn't his to wield. It was his to remember. He reached the edge of a ruined temple by midday, its marble cracked and half swallowed by vines. Statues of forgotten gods stared down at him with blank eyes, their features eroded by time. He took shelter there, lighting a small fire beneath the sheltering arch. As the flames caught, he heard footsteps. He rose instantly, hand on the staff. From the shadows emerged a figure, cloaked, slender, moving with quiet grace. When she lowered her hood, Aric froze. It was the woman from the stream. Her eyes gleamed like stormlight, ancient and knowing. "You've carried it far," she said softly. Her voice was the same one that had whispered through water. "Too far, perhaps." Aric stared, words caught in his throat. "Who are you?" She smiled faintly. "The question you should ask is what I am." She stepped closer, the air around her faintly shimmering. "Once I was called Ela. The dragons named me their keeper. The humans called me a ghost." Aric's grip tightened on the staff. "Why show yourself now?" he asked. "Because the fire stirs," she said, "and men will come to claim it again. You think your king will stop with one dragon? He will turn the flame into war, into crowns, into chains." Her gaze softened. "So you've already seen what happens when power forgets its purpose." Aric looked down, the memory of the envoy's words burning like old coals. "Then what do I do?" he asked. Ela stepped closer, placing a hand over his. "The staff is a seed, yes, but also a key. There are others hidden, waiting. If you plant this one where the first flame began, the world may yet remember balance." Her voice lowered. "But the path there lies through fire." The ground trembled suddenly, dust falling from the temple ceiling. Aric turned, eyes narrowing. In the distance, the sky glowed orange. Smoke rose from the valley. "They found you," Ela said. "The king's hunters." Aric nodded once. "Then we don't have much time." He slung the staff across his back, glancing toward the mountains once more. "Where do I go?" "South," she said. "Beyond the burning plain, where the sea meets the glass cliffs. There the first flame sleeps." She hesitated. "But you won't make it alone." She raised her hand and light flared briefly in her palm, forming a small hovering ember. "This will find you help. If they still remember what they are." Aric took it carefully, feeling the warmth seep into his skin. "And if they don't?" he asked. Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Then the world burns again." They rode hard that night. Aric found an old mare at the temple stables, bones showing beneath her hide but strength still in her stride. The rain had stopped, leaving the air sharp with ozone. Behind them, the king's hunters moved like shadows through the mist, guided by the scent of smoke and the promise of glory. Aric pressed onward, the ember Ela had given him glowing faintly in his palm, pointing ever south. By dawn he reached the edge of the burning plain. It stretched endlessly, scorched earth and blackened stone, the heat rising in waves that distorted the horizon. Nothing lived here, no tree, no bird, only the wind and the memory of fire. He dismounted, letting the horse drink from the last of his water. "Rest," he murmured. "You've done enough." The mare lowered her head, eyes closing as if in thanks. Aric turned to the plain, the staff thrumming faintly against his back. He took a step forward, then another. The heat bit into his skin, searing, relentless. Yet with each step the staff grew cooler, its light stronger as though it drank the fire itself. He walked until the air shimmered gold, until he saw movement in the distance, figures rising from the haze. At first he thought them illusions, but as he drew closer he saw the truth. They were human, but not, skin like obsidian glass, eyes burning with inner flame. The ember in his palm flared. They stopped before him, weapons lowered, wary. "You carry her mark," one said, his voice a rumble. "Ela's touch," Aric nodded. "She said I'd find help." The man studied him, then the staff. "Or doom," he muttered. "The last seed awakens." They led him into the heart of the plain, where the ground cracked open to reveal rivers of molten light. At its center stood a great stone monolith, half sunk, inscribed with runes that pulsed like veins. "This is where the first fire slept," the man said, "and where it must be born again." Aric stepped forward, the staff in both hands. The heat no longer hurt. It welcomed him. He planted the tip against the monolith's surface. Light surged upward, spiraling into the sky. The ground shook, and the air filled with a sound like 1,000 heartbeats. The watchers fell to their knees, shielding their eyes. The staff's glow expanded, filling Aric's vision until nothing else remained. When the light faded, he was alone. The plain was gone. In its place stretched a vast field of green, the air cool and alive. He looked down. His staff was still in his hand, but its glow was gone. A voice spoke behind him, soft and familiar. "You've done it." He turned to see Ela standing there, her form now solid, her smile warm. "You've given the world back its fire," she said. Aric frowned. "Then why do I feel empty?" She stepped closer, touching the staff. "Because the seed takes what it needs." You gave it your strength, your doubt, your fear. It will grow because you chose to let go. She looked out across the new horizon. But the world will not stay peaceful for long. Men will come again. They always do. Aric nodded slowly. Then I'll be here when they do. Ela shook her head gently. No, Aric, your part is done. Others will rise carrying what you've sown. He looked down, realizing the staff's wood was crumbling to ash, scattering in the wind. The light it once held now burned faintly in his chest, a quiet, steady warmth. What happens to me? He asked. Ela's eyes softened. You live. She turned, fading slowly with the dawn light. And that Aric of the staff is what they will never understand. The wind carried her last words away. Aric stood alone, the horizon stretching endless and bright before him. For the first time, he felt no laughter behind him, no mockery, no fear, only silence and the quiet heartbeat of a world reborn. The grass swayed in long silver arcs beneath the morning wind, each blade glimmering with dew that caught the newborn sunlight like shards of glass. Aric stood at the edge of the transformed plain, the last warmth of the vanished staff pulsing faintly in his chest. The silence here was not absence, but fullness, alive with unseen rhythm. He could feel it underfoot, humming through the soil, beating in time with his own heart. What had once been charred earth now shimmered with life so new it almost hurt to look at. Yet he felt no triumph, only stillness. The world had changed, yes, but so had he, and the weight of both pressed on him like a hand between his shoulders. He took a step forward, then another, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. Each breath tasted of rain and ash, as though the air still remembered what it had been before rebirth. Birds circled overhead, their wings leaving faint trails of color across the pale sky. Somewhere far behind him, the faint echo of distant horns carried through the wind. He knew what it meant. The king's reach was long, and word of miracles traveled faster than truth. He had planted peace, but men would soon come to harvest power. The thought tightened his chest. He began walking, following the curve of a stream that glowed faintly beneath the morning light. Its current whispered like voices, fragments of languages long dead. He listened, though he couldn't understand. The sound soothed him all the same, like a lullaby for the weary. By midday he reached a ridge that overlooked a valley of wildflowers stretching toward the horizon. In the distance stood the remnants of an ancient fortress, stone walls cracked, towers leaning like old men too tired to stand straight. The sight stirred a memory. He had read of this place as a boy, a ruin left from the first fire wars when men and dragons had shared the same skies. He descended carefully, feeling the rhythm beneath his feet shift with every step, as if the land itself breathed in anticipation. When he reached the gate, vines hung thick over the broken archway. He pushed through, the scent of earth and moss filling his lungs. The inside was quiet except for the murmur of water dripping through cracks in the roof. Light filtered down in soft shafts, illuminating carvings along the walls. Dragons and humans standing side by side, flames rising between them not in battle, but in unity. He ran his fingers along one of the figures, tracing the lines of a dragon's wing. "We forgot," he whispered. The echo answered softly, "You remembered." He froze, heart hammering. The voice had not been his own. He turned, scanning the dim hall. A shape emerged from the far shadows, tall, cloaked and leaning on a curved staff of dark metal. The stranger's hood concealed his face, but his presence filled the space with quiet gravity. "I've walked this path for years," the voice said, low and even, waiting for someone who could wake the mountain. Aric's hand moved reflexively to where his staff had once rested on his back, then stopped. The stranger raised a hand, palm open. "No need for that. You've already done what none of us could." Aric studied him. "You speak as if you knew what I would do." The stranger tilted his head slightly. "We hoped, not knew. The fire sleeps in many hearts, but only some dare let it burn." They sat beneath the broken arch, sharing silence as sunlight crept across the floor. The stranger finally spoke again. "You've planted the seed, but the roots are shallow still. The king gathers armies. He calls it conquest, but he means resurrection, his own." Aric frowned. "He'll come here?" The stranger nodded. "He'll come everywhere the light touches. To him fire is coin." He leaned closer, lowering his hood. His face was marked with ash tattoos in the shape of interlocking circles. "I am Varen," he said, "once of the king's order. Before I saw what power makes of men, I came to warn you. Aric studied him, noting the steady calm in his eyes. Then tell me what I need to do. Veyron's gaze shifted to the horizon, where storm clouds gathered. You cannot fight him with fire. He will twist every flame to his will. But the mountain you woke, it listens to you now. If you can reach its heart again, you can silence his armies before they march. Aric's stomach tightened. And if I fail? Veyron looked back at him. Then the world burns twice. They set out together that evening, heading north through the growing dusk. The path wound through meadows heavy with mist, their steps soft on the reborn earth. As night fell, the stars shone brighter than Aric remembered, as if the sky itself had been cleansed. They camped beneath a hollowed tree whose roots arched like ribs. The air hummed faintly with warmth, the echoes of the staff's buried power still rippling through the world. Aric watched the fire crackle and thought of the dragon, of its final words. Let them laugh, for laughter dies quicker than flame. He wondered if the dragon had known what would come after. The hunger of kings, the folly of men who believed victory meant dominion. Veyron broke the silence. You still hear it, don't you? The hum. Aric nodded. It's quieter now, but it's there. Like a heartbeat I can't forget. Veyron smiled faintly. Then you haven't lost it. The staff may be gone, but what it carried isn't. He looked into the flames. Fire remembers its bearer. At dawn they reached the river of glass, a wide expanse of water so still it mirrored the world perfectly. As they approached, ripples spread outward, though no wind stirred. Aric knelt, touching the surface lightly. The water shimmered gold, forming symbols that danced across the reflection before vanishing. Veyron watched silently. The world recognizes you, he said. It will not let you pass unnoticed. Across the river, faint figures moved, scouts armored, banners fluttering. The king's men. Aric exhaled slowly. Then we'll have to move faster. They followed the riverbank north until the mountains rose once more, their peaks draped in cloud. As they climbed, the hum beneath Aric's feet grew stronger, guiding him like a pulse. By the time they reached the first ridge, the wind carried the scent of smoke again. Not from the earth this time, but from campfires. Below them, thousands of soldiers spread across the valley like a sea of iron. He's moving sooner than we thought, Veyron said. Aric's jaw clenched. Then we reached the heart tonight. They climbed through the night, rain lashing against their faces, thunder echoing in the distance. The mountain groaned beneath each step, alive and restless. At last they reached the same cavern where it had begun. The entrance glowed faintly now, veins of gold pulsing beneath the stone like slow lightning. Aric stepped inside, and the hum became a roar in his blood. The staff's remnant in his chest flared hot, spreading light through his veins. He stumbled, catching himself on the wall. "It's waking," he gasped. Veyron's hand gripped his shoulder. "Then listen." Aric closed his eyes, breathing deep. The sound deepened until it became words, not heard but felt. The seed grows. The roots bleed. The fire remembers. He opened his eyes, the light blazing behind them. "It's calling the mountain," he whispered. "It knows what's coming." The dragon's voice came then, faint but unmistakable. "You've returned, Flame-bearer?" The great shape stirred from the shadows, its scales dim but unbroken. The world above stirs again. Men hunger louder than fire itself. Aric bowed his head. "I thought peace would hold." The dragon's eyes glimmered faintly. "Peace is a wound that must be tended, not left to scar." Veyron stepped forward. "If we can awaken the mountain fully, it might silence their weapons before they reach us." The dragon studied him, smoke curling from its nostrils. "Awakening has a price." Aric met its gaze. "I know." The dragon lowered its head, the cavern trembling beneath its weight. "Then speak the word and the fire will answer. But once done, it cannot be undone." Aric hesitated. The hum in his chest throbbed painfully, as though reminding him what he had already given. "If I call it," he said softly, "it will take me." The dragon nodded once. "As it took those before you. The world always asks of fire what it refuses to give back." Outside, the first horn sounded, the king's army approaching the ridge. Aric turned toward the light of the cavern mouth, his breath steady despite the fear clawing at his ribs. Veyron placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to do this alone." Aric smiled faintly. "I already am not." He stepped forward, placing his palm flat against the stone at the cavern's center. The surface blazed to life, symbols spreading outward in rippling rings. The mountain groaned, shaking loose centuries of dust. Light erupted from the cracks, pouring upward like a reversed waterfall. Outside, the soldiers shouted as the ground trembled beneath them. The dragon rose behind Aric, wings spreading wide, eyes burning gold. "Speak it," it rumbled. Aric drew in a breath that seared his lungs and whispered the word that had haunted his dreams since Haldron's Deep. The mountain answered, flame roared from the earth, not in destruction, but revelation. Rivers of molten light carved paths through the valley, encircling the approaching army. Swords melted, armor turned to slag, but no man burned. The fire passed through them like wind through leaves, leaving only the memory of heat. The soldiers fell to their knees, eyes wide, their rage dissolved into awe. Above them, lightning split the sky, revealing the shape of the dragon's wings stretching across the clouds. Veyron stared in stunned silence. "He's become the bridge," he whispered. Aric stood at the heart of it, his body alight with gold, every vein a conduit of living fire. He could feel everything, the pulse of the earth, the rhythm of rain, the heartbeat of every creature still breathing. He saw the fear fade from men's eyes, replaced by something older, reverence. Then slowly the light began to fade. The mountain's tremors subsided, the air cooling. Aric staggered, the fire draining from his body like water through sand. The dragon lowered its head beside him. "The flame endures," it said. "You have done what even I could not." Aric's vision blurred, his knees giving way. Veyron caught him before he fell completely. "Stay with me," the older man urged. Aric smiled faintly, the light behind his eyes dimming. "The world remembers now," he murmured. "That's enough." The dragon's great eye closed, a low hum filling the cavern. Outside, dawn broke again, the sky streaked with gold. When the first rays touched Aric's still form, the fire that had lived within him rose once more, quietly, gently, and vanished into the morning air. Veyron laid him beside the glowing stone, folding his hands over his chest. "He carried the fire and he returned it," he whispered. The dragon's voice rumbled low. "Then perhaps this time men will learn." The mountain settled, its hum soft but unending, and somewhere far below, in the heart of the stone, a new ember began to glow, waiting, patient, ready to remember. The morning after the mountain's awakening came quietly, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The wind carried no smoke now, only the scent of rain and stone newly split open. Veyron stood at the mouth of the cavern, cloak heavy with ash, watching sunlight break over the valley below. Where an army had once knelt in fear, there was only silence and the faint shimmer of glass where fire had kissed the earth. The soldiers had left in the night, walking without command, their banners forgotten in the mud. None spoke of conquest anymore. They moved like men waking from a fever dream. Veyron tightened his cloak around his shoulders and turned back into the cavern, where the glow of the mountain still pulsed gently, like a sleeping heart. Aric lay where dawn had found him, the last traces of light fading from his skin, his expression calm as if resting between breaths. Veyron knelt beside him, pressing a hand to the cold earth. The warmth that once thrummed through every stone was quieter now, but not gone. It lingered beneath the surface, alive in a way that words could never reach. "He gave it back," Veyron whispered, voice catching in his throat. "And the world accepted." He stayed there for a long time, the sound of dripping water marking each passing moment. At last he rose, his knees stiff, his heart heavy. The dragon still lay at the far end of the cavern, massive wings folded, eyes half closed. When Veyron approached, it stirred slightly, smoke curling from its nostrils. "He is gone," the dragon said, its tone neither question nor lament. "No," Veyron answered softly. "He's everywhere now." The dragon's gaze lingered on him. "You speak as though you understand the burden." "I do," Veyron replied, "but I'm only a man." He became more than that. The dragon's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the distant light. "Then carry what remains before the world forgets again." When Veyron stepped outside, the sun had climbed high enough to warm the valley. The mountain's shadow stretched long, touching the fields where green shoots were already piercing the ground. He followed the narrow path downward, his thoughts heavy with what lay ahead. Word of the miracle would spread faster than any rider. Some would see it as salvation, others as threat. He had no illusions about kings or their hunger. They would come again, cloaked in faith instead of armor, bearing scrolls instead of swords, all seeking to name and own what could not be claimed. Yet somewhere in the silence beneath his feet, Veyron felt the echo of Aric's choice. Fire reborn not for domination, but for memory. The staff was gone, but its roots were everywhere. He reached the lower ridge by dusk where the remnants of the king's encampment lay scattered. Tents half collapsed, weapons abandoned, banners torn loose by the wind. Amid the wreckage, a few soldiers lingered, their faces pale with exhaustion and awe. One approached hesitantly, helmet tucked under his arm. "Sir," he began, voice shaking, "was it true? Did the mountain speak?" Veyran studied him a moment, then nodded once. "It remembered." The soldier frowned as though struggling to understand. "And the one who carried the staff. He walks with it still," Veyran said. "Just not where we can follow." The soldier bowed his head, confusion softening into reverence. "Then we'll go home." Veyran watched them leave, their footsteps fading down the valley path. He wondered what homes they would find, what stories they would tell, and whether the truth would survive even a single retelling. Night came clear and cold, stars crowding the sky like embers flung wide. Veyran built a small fire beside a stream, the same rhythm he had learned as a boy. Stone-ringed, flame-coaxed patience held. The light reflected on the water, breaking into 1,000 trembling shards. As he stared, a faint shape appeared within the reflection. A woman's face, eyes luminous as moonlight. "You kept your word," she said. It was Ila's voice, gentle and endless. Veyran bowed his head slightly. "And he kept yours." Her reflection rippled, the water trembling as though with laughter. "He gave the world back its choice. That is all the fire ever wanted." He looked up, the sky mirrored in his tired eyes. "What happens now?" She smiled faintly. "Now it grows, not in stone or staff, but in hearts willing to remember." The reflection dimmed, leaving only starlight behind. Veyran sat for a long while before the fire, feeling both small and infinite. Weeks passed. The valley healed. Grass spread across once burned slopes, wildflowers returning in hues unseen for generations. Travelers began to whisper of the miracle at Haldron's Deep, of fire that did not burn, of soldiers who laid down arms and walked home. Priests spoke of prophecy, kings of renewal, scholars of strange phenomena. But among the villagers who had once mocked a quiet shepherd with a wooden staff, the story was simpler. They said he had listened when the earth whispered. They said he had walked into a dragon's den and come out with sunlight in his hands. No one could agree on what had happened, but all agreed that the wind in the valley now hummed softly, like a lullaby. Children began leaving small carvings of wooden staves by the riverside, hoping the mountain would remember their names too. Veyran became a wanderer. He traveled from town to town, teaching what little he knew, how to tend fire without owning it, how to listen for the hum beneath stone. He carried no weapon, only a walking stick cut from a young birch whose roots had sprouted on the plain where Aric fell. It glowed faintly at night, enough to light his path. Some called him prophet, others fool, but he never stayed long enough to argue. Wherever he went, crops grew stronger, wells ran clearer, tempers softened. When asked how he did it, he would smile and say, "The world is kind when you let it breathe." Still, he carried a shadow inside him, the memory of Aric's final look, that quiet acceptance that asked nothing in return. One spring evening, he returned to Terrafall, the village where Aric's journey had begun. The streets were livelier than he remembered, merchants calling, children running, laughter spilling from tavern doors. Yet the tower where the old mages once mocked a young apprentice now stood empty, its stones covered in ivy. Veyran walked to the square where a new statue had been raised, a man holding a simple staff, his gaze fixed toward the mountain. No crown, no armor, just calm resolve carved in stone. The inscription read, "He listened." Veyran smiled faintly. He would have liked that, he murmured. A woman nearby turned, recognizing the traveler who spoke with the tone of someone who knew. "You knew him?" she asked. Veyran nodded. "I still do." The woman studied him, eyes soft. "They say he'll return someday." "In a way," Veyran replied, "he already has." As night deepened, he found a bench overlooking the river and sat listening to the murmuring water. The birch staff rested across his knees, glowing softly beneath the moon. He could feel the hum again, stronger than it had been in months, running through the ground, the trees, the very air. It carried voices, faint, interwoven, human and not. The world was singing, quietly but unmistakably. He closed his eyes and let it fill him, the sound vast and tender. When he opened them again, he wasn't alone. Children had gathered, drawn by the light. One stepped forward wide-eyed. "Mister, is it true? The dragon isn't bad anymore?" Veyran smiled. The dragon never was bad. It was just waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The child tilted his head. "Like the man with the wooden stick." "Exactly like him." The boy grinned, running back to his friends, their laughter echoing through the square. Veyran looked up at the mountain silhouette, dark against the stars, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, fragile but real. Years drifted like leaves on a slow river. The story of Aric the Listener became legend, then myth, then faith. Kingdoms rose and fell. Wars flared and cooled. But the valleys near Haldran's Deep remained untouched. Pilgrims came to light candles. Lovers carved initials into the birch trees that now filled the plain. And old songs spoke of a man who carried the fire of understanding instead of conquest. In distant lands, smiths told tales of blades that dulled in his presence. Healers whispered of wounds closing when his name was spoken. Whether any of it was true mattered less than the change it left behind. Even the dragons, thought extinct, were sometimes glimpsed at twilight, vast shapes gliding above the clouds, not in menace but in memory. On the 50th spring after the mountain's awakening, a tremor ran through the valley, gentle as a sigh. The villagers paused their work, looking to the horizon. From the mountain's peak rose a thin column of light, gold fading to blue, vanishing into the sky. No fire followed, no thunder, only warmth spreading through the soil, making the early blossoms bloom all at once. The oldest among them smiled, whispering that the world was breathing again. Far from the crowd, an old man sat beneath a tree, his birch staff across his lap, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. Veyran exhaled slowly, a faint smile touching his weathered face. "He never really left," he said. The breeze answered, rustling the leaves in a rhythm he knew too well. As dusk fell, the air shimmered faintly before him, and a figure appeared, familiar yet changed. Aric stood bathed in twilight light, neither ghost nor flesh, eyes calm as still water. "You've kept watch," he said. Veyran bowed his head. Someone had to. Aric looked toward the valley where lanterns flickered like stars come to rest on earth. "They've learned." "Some have," Veyran admitted. "Others will," Aric smiled, the expression quiet and proud. "That's enough." They sat together in silence, the weight of years dissolving between them. When the first stars appeared, Aric rose. "The fire moves on," he said. "It's time for it to find new hands." Veyran's fingers brushed the birch staff. "Will they be ready?" "They never are," Aric replied, "but they always learn." His form began to fade, light scattering into the evening air. "Goodbye, old friend." "Not goodbye," Veyran murmured, "just until the world forgets again." Long after the apparition faded, Veyran remained beneath the tree, listening to the night. The hum of the earth was softer now, but it carried laughter, children playing, rivers singing, wind through leaves. He closed his eyes, feeling it all settle deep within him. When dawn came, villagers found him there, seated peacefully, a faint smile on his face. The birch staff had rooted into the ground beside him, leaves unfurling bright and green. They buried him beneath that tree, marking the spot with a single stone carved with 7 words. "He taught us to listen for fire." Over time, the staff grew into a great tree, whose branches glowed faintly at night, and travelers said its roots reached the heart of the mountain itself. Centuries passed. Empires crumbled, languages shifted, faiths were rewritten. Yet the story endured in one form or another, of a man with a simple staff, mocked for believing wood could face steel, who walked into the mouth of a dragon and came out carrying light. Scholars argued over its truth. Poets sang of its beauty, but every generation produced someone, a farmer, a healer, a child, who heard the hum beneath their feet and paused to listen. And in those moments the world remembered. The fire never left. It simply waited. On a night when the stars were brighter than memory, a young girl climbed the slopes of Haldran's Deep. In her hand, she carried a stick of driftwood, smooth and unremarkable. She reached the cavern's mouth and felt warmth spill over her fingers. The stone beneath her boots vibrated softly, welcoming her. She smiled, stepping inside. The walls glowed faintly, old runes lighting one by one. "I can hear you," she whispered. The mountain answered with a pulse of light, gentle and alive. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying laughter across the valley. Somewhere deep within the stone, two voices, one calm, one kind, echoed together, proud and unending. The girl raised her wooden staff high, and the world breathed once more.